College baseball's NCAA tournament has arrived, and we are here to break down the Morgantown Regional. This is the Gold and Blue Nation podcast, presented by Mountain State Oral and Facial Surgery, home of the Same Day Smile. Ryan Decker and Cody Nespor here with you in Morgantown. And Cody, college baseball postseason play is back in Morgantown for the first time since 2019, just the third time in the history of the sport. You can really feel the excitement here in the area and throughout the fan base. And what a treat it's going to be this weekend to see Kendrick Family Ballpark just packed to the gills with WVU fans playing really meaningful baseball here in Morgantown and in Granville.
Right, and we've been right on the edge of this the last couple seasons of maybe they'll host, maybe they're not. So to finally get over that line this year, like you said, it's very exciting. I think people have been hungry for it, right? They've kind of been teased by it the last couple of years where they've been so close to that line. And yeah, I mean, and we think back to 19, the crowds they get on a regular, Friday night, Saturday game versus back then, like I can't imagine how many people have already tried and failed to get tickets to go to some of these.
Yeah, the regular season ticket holders, I think some are upset that maybe their seats might change a little bit based on just the sheer desire to have a seat by everyone, it seems like, in the state of West Virginia right now, to have a seat in this ballpark this weekend. And then, there's other people who are just simply, they just want to be in the door, to say they were at the 2026 Morgantown Regional just the same way that people just wanted to be inside the facility there in 2019, just to say, hey, I was at the first, in this iteration of the tournament, in this format of the tournament, the first Morgantown Regional in program history. So we're going to break down the Morgantown Regional here in a little bit. You'll also hear from Steve Sabins coming up in a little bit. But Cody, let's look at the Big 12, perspective of the NCAA tournament. Maybe a potential snub coming from the Big 12, two hosts by the Big 12 after last year not having a single host. That was huge for the conference. But Cody, any disrespect that the Big 12 should feel about Kansas and WVU being the 15th and 16th national seeds respectively, so the two lowest seeded host teams? Should the Big 12 feel disrespect, or is it simply you're grateful to have two hosts as opposed to zero last year?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B, because like last year, the best team in the Big 12, West Virginia, didn't get a host. And this year, with two deserving teams, they both do. Kansas probably has a pretty decent gripe as the regular season and tournament champions of a power conference, of a conference that's thought of very highly in the sport. To be 15, behind so many non-champions and frankly teams that didn't even play for a tournament championship. Kansas probably has a gripe with that. West Virginia, if we were going off last year's sort of reasoning or just how they selected last year's field, West Virginia wouldn't have made it. So to get in, or to host, not to get to host, to get in the top 16 feels good for West Virginia. It feels good for the conference. But I'm sure, like I said, Kansas, the Big 12 probably isn't thrilled their double champion is so far down the seed line.
Yeah, really, it's one blip on the radar for Kansas, which was the series sweep against West Virginia in May. That maybe was the eyesore on Kansas's resume, but otherwise Kansas had a perfect resume to be, you would think, the 12, 13, somewhere around there, which ultimately went to Nebraska at 13 and Texas A&M at 12. I definitely think that Kansas should have been in that region. I wasn't surprised to see WVU at 16. I think just falling one game short in the regular season and then falling essentially 9 runs short there in the Big 12 tournament against Kansas in the title game, you probably were going to be the 15 or 16 come selection Monday. And that made sense to me. But certainly I think West Virginia deserved to be a host. I think there are some other teams out there, maybe a couple SEC teams, who just seem to be really annoyed this week that they didn't have 16 regional hosts. I mean, some of the stuff that I've seen on social media this week, just the complaining from SEC fans, some of whom are hosting. Mississippi State, I'm looking at you, by the way. Some of these fan bases just believe it is their birthright to be hosting an NCAA tournament. And sorry, there is baseball played in other pockets of the country than just the Deep South. I just want to put that out there for some of those fan bases. But certainly I'm with you that Kansas maybe had a bit of an axe to grind. West Virginia, I think, is very comfortable being a 15 or 16 to 16 ultimately is what they become. Cody, TCU, I think had a pretty good case to at least be in consideration. They were a first four team out, but should TCU have maybe gotten in over the likes of, say, a Kentucky team that is coming to Morgantown? I think so.
Yeah, it's interesting. TCU, I think, talented enough certainly to make it. That their resume obviously took a hit with Tommy Laporte missing so much of the season. Like they're probably a very different team if he makes a dozen starts versus I think four he's ended up with. But it was a really crowded bubble, right? Because you think TCU didn't get in. Pitt didn't get in. A lot of people thought they would. And then a 44-win Mercer team is left home because they lost in their conference tournament. So it was a really crowded bubble. I am surprised Kentucky is the team that emerges from that, given their conference record. And like they only won two SEC series all year, which isn't to me a strong resume, but yeah, there is some bias there in the computer rankings because they play all the other SEC teams. But yeah, I think like I said, talent-wise, and I think Steve Sabins would agree with that, talent-wise, well, a lot of Big 12 coaches would, talent-wise, they could have been a tournament team, but they just didn't have the bona fides this year.
Yeah, and unfortunately for TCU, a couple percentage points behind Kentucky when you look at that head-to-head and like DSR and RPI. And you mentioned it there. Kentucky only won 2 of its 10 SEC series, dropped series to, I believe, all 3 teams that were situated below the Wildcats in the final SEC standings. So, again, not saying this because Kentucky's coming here or because we're once again seeing Kentucky and WVU in a regional. I just thought Kentucky didn't really have a case to get in over the Mercer team you mentioned. It really stinks that a mid-major program like that gets left out of the tournament field, but we're over TCU as well. I didn't think Kentucky should be in. Looking at the Big 12, Cody, before we just shift our focus totally here to Morgantown, any fun matchups that you see in the NCAA tournament as it comes to, I'll guess, seed lines and the host? So obviously West Virginia and Kansas are the 2 hosts out of the Big 12. You've got Oklahoma State, a 2 seed in the Tuscaloosa Regional, Cincinnati, a 2 seed in the Starkville, Mississippi State Regional, UCF, a surprising 2 seed heading to Auburn, and then Arizona State, the 3 seed out of the Big 12 heading to Nebraska. Any of those kind of sexier maybe than another for you?
I think Arizona State's in a fun region with Nebraska and Ole Miss. Like I think that'll just be a dogfight of a region. Yep. UCF, I think that's a sneaky. You mentioned it's surprising they got the 2 seed. That's sneaky. Like they're up against Auburn, who is what 4.
Yeah, the number 4 overall seed, and then NC State also in that region with the head coach who's retiring. So could this be a Randy Mazey swan song type situation for NC State?
But I really like UCF in that region. Like, I don't know if I would say they're obviously not the favorites to win, but I like them to maybe scare Auburn a little bit. And then like Oklahoma State, we didn't see them this year, but with an offense that powerful, like all it takes is 2 days to get hot, right? And you could win a region. And I think of all the Big 12 teams, maybe Oklahoma State would be the most prone to just get supernova and win a region like that.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think Oklahoma State, of the non-hosting teams, Oklahoma State would be my pick to come out of a regional as far as the Big 12 goes, just because Alabama's been really good throughout the season, but I think they are just 1 or 2 things shy of being a great team as opposed to a good team. And do those warts, do some of those trouble spots show up in a regional, like you said, against an Oklahoma State team that we know can mash and hit the ball really, really well? And we've seen throughout the years in NCAA regional play, those teams that can mash really well, especially hit home runs in an SEC environment, especially where the ballparks maybe play a little bit smaller. Yeah, those teams tend to have success. All right. Let's switch focus now to the Morgantown Regional. We've kind of danced around this a little bit. It's West Virginia as the host, Wake Forest the number 2 seed, Kentucky as the number 3 seed, and then Binghamton out of the America East is your number 4 seed in this regional. But Cody, the conversation has to start with Kentucky again. This is now 3 of the last 4 years that West Virginia and Kentucky are paired in a regional. West Virginia swept Kentucky in 2 meetings last year in Clemson en route to winning the Clemson regional. And then a couple of years ago, Kentucky actually hosted West Virginia in 2023 in Lexington, and Kentucky got the better of the Mountaineers in that matchup. It just seems like a theme, Cody, not just in baseball. We saw this in women's basketball as well. If West Virginia is going to make a regionalized version of an NCAA tournament, it seems like Kentucky's going to be right there with them.
Yeah, and it's fun. 3 years ago, Kentucky hosted, and now WU gets to return the favor. Yeah, I don't know. I guess it is that that regionality. Like they're close enough; they're just going to be stapled together. Um, it's a lot. In the when we found out WU would host, a lot of us were talking about what Coastal Carolina or
Yep.
Virginia Tech or Old Miss. I think got brought up, and
Hmm.
maybe in hindsight, it's like, yeah, maybe we could have just penciled in Kentucky there, probably.
Yeah, apparently. I think everyone was expecting the 2 seed in this regional to be from the SEC, which would have kicked Kentucky to the side, would have had to go somewhere else. But when the 2 seeds from the ACC, that certainly opened the door for a Kentucky team to come here to Morgantown and play the Mountaineers. And it's interesting too, Cody. We learned this, or we were reminded of this, I guess I should say, on Monday after the selection show, that there's familiarity between West Virginia and Kentucky, obviously because of the meeting in the two of the last three NCAA tournaments, now three of the last four, including this year. West Virginia and Wake Forest also played against one another in the 2017 Winston-Salem Regional there that Wake Forest hosted. But there is more current familiarity between those two teams, those three teams, in that West Virginia played Kentucky and Wake Forest in the fall this year. The Kentucky game was kind of highlighted by Weston Mazie hitting a home run, his first collegiate home run, so to speak. And then the Wake Forest game was really a kind of star-studded affair. There were people from the Team USA organization who were there. Steve Sabins said back in the fall there were GMs and other scouts there at that fall ball affair. And apparently, a lot of things that happened in that game, that 18-inning ball game they played, came to fruition this year. Matthew Gravelin and Sean Smith being at the middle of the order, Gavin Kelly kind of being a table setter at the top of West Virginia's lineup. Listened back to it, and Steve Sabins said that Chanson Cole went 3 really effective innings, and we've certainly seen that out of him so far this spring. A lot of things that happened in that fall ball meeting kind of came to fruition in the spring. It's really interesting how that matched up. But Cody, that familiarity, does it just work in West Virginia's favor? Work in Kentucky and Wake Forest's favor as well?
And, I mean, it probably works both ways. Steve said, like a lot of times you'd think like, oh, a preseason game, does that tell that much? But Steve kind of said like, hey, in the fall, teams are just trying to see what they have, so they play a ton of players. So you see
Mm-hmm.
basically everybody. So it's not going to be a robust scouting report, but like they've probably seen a good bit of each of those rosters and vice versa. Those teams have probably seen a good bit of West Virginia's roster. So you have at least a starting point on players and pitchers, and maybe it's, hey, Gavin Kelly, remember you faced their starter in the fall. Do you remember that at bat, or
Right.
something as simple as that, where it's like at least a foothold. You're not because a tournament like this, you have to scout 3 teams in what 5 days. Like that's a lot. So to be able to have anything to draw on is a plus.
Yeah, and Steve joked that his wife asked him when Binghamton popped up on the screen, "Hey, like, are they good? Like, what do you know about Binghamton?" And he kind of said, "Well, haven't been doing a lot of Binghamton scouting this year." So, yeah, I think a lot of the scouting, at least early on, goes to the Binghamton team. But certainly, yeah, a lot of scouting goes then to Kentucky and Wake Forest. You expect to see down the road in this Friday, Saturday, Sunday, potentially Monday regional schedule. Cody, 2 power conference teams coming to Morgantown. So you've got 3 power conference teams in this regional, as was the case in 2019 when West Virginia hosted. According to RPI and DSR, Diamond Sports Ranking, this is the 5th toughest regional of the 16 in the field when you look at composite, the composite ratings in those metrics. But I found it really interesting. I saw this earlier this week. If you take the 4 seed out of all of the different regionals, so you kick Binghamton to the curb and all the other mid-major conference winners, a lot of them, Morgantown becomes the 2nd toughest regional in the field. 3 teams in the top 30 in DSR, 2 in the top 20 in RPI. Did West Virginia, did they get the short end of the straw with having such a tough regional draw, or is that just kind of, that's the hand you're dealt when you're the 16, right?
Yeah, I was gonna say when you're the 16 seed, you should have the hardest regional, right? And I just kind of glossing through them earlier and on Monday, like it seems tough, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
these aren't like, as much as we said we were questioning Kentucky, like they've got like legit players, right? And like they didn't play as well as some other teams this season, but I don't know. Like, would we be surprised if Kentucky wins this? Probably not. Would we be surprised if Wake wins this? Not at all,
Definitely
right?
not.
And
Yeah.
and there's not a lot of regions where there's 3 teams that you could say that about. There's a lot of regions you look at and you're like, well, that's a 2-team race,
Hmm.
right? Or well, there's a heavy favorite, and then there's maybe one team that'll push them, right? Or, there's two or three that are like, oh, well, they're not going to play on Monday, right? Like that Monday night
Right.
game's not going to be needed. But like you said, like that's life as the 16 seed. Like
Mhm.
you're not going to get the easy draw.
And it seems like over the years too, West Virginia has fared pretty well in these really difficult or at least very evenly paired regionals, right? You think 2017, that was pretty evenly put together with Wake Forest as the power and the host, but then Maryland, a good program at the time in the Big Ten, and then West Virginia, an upcoming program out of the Big 12. That was pretty even. West Virginia goes to the title game. You think 2024, the Tucson regional, that was, as you were just talking about, that was truly a regional that all throughout the country, people were picking one of three different teams to come out of that region. And actually, West Virginia kind of just strolls through that regional 3-0 pretty quickly. And then last year, too, the Clemson Regional, I'd say fairly evenly stacked. Clemson had a really good pedigree of being successful, especially in the regional round. Kentucky, we know they have a pedigree, and West Virginia continues to build its pedigree, and they surely did, but with sweeping that regional. So West Virginia does have a track record, at least here recently, of being good and winning ball games in these really difficult regionals. Cody, were you at the regional in 2019?
I didn't cover it. I was at one of the games.
Okay, so you were at one of the games. I was also at one of the games, didn't cover it. What should fans expect the atmosphere to be like here this weekend? And specifically, should the top attendance record, will that go down at some point this weekend?
I think if if they're allowed to squeeze that many people in, yes. um,
What's a fire marshal bribe going for these
yeah,
days? It can't be much, right?
the berm's big enough, right? Just keep sliding
Yeah, it's
over.
fine.
I think back to the women's tournament or women's basketball tournament and how like we thought it was going to be a big crowd, and then we showed up 4 hours before the game, and the line to get in was wrapped around the Coliseum. Like I kind of expected that kind of turnout again. We're like sitting here, we're like, yeah, it'll be a big crowd. It could be a very big crowd, and maybe we'll get there Friday, and it's like, whoa, you know what I mean? Like they're obviously going to sell all the seats. They're going to fill up on the standing room only tickets. Like, I don't know how many people to expect to stand up on the hill right from the WVU Medicine building and watch. And I don't know how many people to expect to just kind of be around, right? Just
Right.
we might be in for another like big surprise, like we just saw at the Coliseum a couple months ago.
It should be a huge crowd. 4629 is the top attendance record in program history and in Mon County ballpark history, Kendrick Family Ballpark history. Now, 4629, that's the number to beat. I think they do end up smashing that this weekend at some point, whether it's on Friday for the Binghamton game or whatever Saturday or Sunday, potentially Monday becomes. I think that number eventually goes down just because they're going to find a way to get creative on how to get all those people in there down the left and right field lines. And like you said, this won't count in the attendance numbers, but all the people who will be up on the hillside there by the WVU Medicine facility, that will be, I think, the really cool sight and the cool indicator of how this fan base has changed over time, just how packed that is going to be.
Yeah.
All right, so that's a pretty good primer here for the Morgantown Regional. We're going to step aside here and take a break. When we come back, we'll have comments from Steve Sabins on what it means just for West Virginia to make the NCAA tournament and host a regional again, and also what it means to be transforming into a power member of college baseball, power program in the sport. That'll be next when we come back here on the Golden Blue Nation podcast.
The reason I came to the practice was because I had had some teeth extracted and I wanted to get some replacements for it. We did a treatment plan to see how many implants they were going to place, and now I'm actually just waiting to get the crowns. The thing I liked the most about coming here, I was greeted with a smile, everything ran smooth, and that they were really going to do what I wanted them to do to make my smile a little better. They're some of the best doctors, and you will get good quality care.
Searching for a mortgage lender that's 100% local, personal, and focused on home loans? First Green Mortgage has been serving West Virginia for more than 35 years, and they can assist you with every step of your home ownership journey. Visit them in Bridgeport or Morgantown or at fgm.bank.
Welcome back to the Golden Blue Nation podcast. Let's hear now from Steve Sabins on Monday, Selection Monday, after he learned West Virginia is the number 16 overall national seed in the tournament and what it means to host another regional here in Morgantown.
To be able to go to 4 consecutive regionals is certainly special, and mixing a hosting
situation for the community and the state. There's nothing better. Like the people of this state are passionate about our program. They're passionate about WVU. And so to be able to bring an event like this here is meaningful to me. And I'm just really proud of the staff and the players and my family and everybody that's going to get to experience high-level college baseball. There'll be great opponents. The atmosphere in Morgantown is really hard to beat. I know that tickets will be extremely hard to come by, and we will pack as many people in that place as the fire marshal allows.
Coach, what's it mean to you that you have a tournament coming up this week, national traditional powers, Kentucky and Wake Forest, and they're coming to Morgantown?
It's awesome. I could talk about that for an hour. When I got here in 2015, I hadn't been a regional in 20 years, and when we cracked through in 2017, it was the first time in 21 years. And so people didn't know we had a baseball team back then. And now we're going to 4 consecutive regionals and mixing and hosting. We've been to back-to-back super regionals. So that this become more common that our program is mentioned with those kind of programs, right? And so I think in the baseball world, it's not surprising. And with people that really follow the sport, they know what this program is and how it's been built and the success that it's had. But I think if you're just casual observer, you may have some of those feelings like, man, those are traditional or they've been great. But I think we're certainly, performed at a very high level consistently for the last 6-7 years.
Can't beat to being at home. I mean, I don't know what the numbers are. 22 home games this year has got to be the fewest of any national seat, probably.
Yep.
So just playing at home as opposed to getting an airplane to trap.
The path to Omaha is clearly in hosting. What we've done for the last 2 years, winning at somebody else's regional is incredibly hard. If there's a team that can do it, it's West Virginia because of the amount of road games that we play. We consistently play on the road, and over the last 2 years, I'd have to look. You're the man to actually look. But we've probably won more road games than anybody in the nation from a Power 4 school perspective.
Steve, how different is the program now versus 2019?
Immensely. College athletics is completely different. I mean, we weren't paying players. We had half the staff members. We hadn't hosted in 65 years. Like, we didn't have offices upstairs. I mean, the list goes on and on. Everything has essentially been built from scratch. And so I would say almost every year this program is unrecognizable from the year before. And so that far back, it's very different. The depth of the team is very different. 2019, Manoa led us to that regional hosting. He was one of the best pitchers in the country, ended up being a first rounder. And so it's just a different makeup of the team. We have more depth and a different university, a different college, a different program.
That was Steve Sabins on Monday outside of the GOAT here in Morgantown. We're going to hear from Steve Sabins and some select WVU players again on Thursday after their final practice before regional play gets underway on Friday at Mon County Ballpark. It's Wake Forest and Kentucky at noon over at the ballpark, and then it'll be West Virginia and Binghamton Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern on ESPN+. So, Cody, let's start diving into these teams here a little bit that West Virginia is paired up with in this Morgantown Regional. I'll just give you the floor here, starting with Wake Forest. Give me a pitcher and a position player on each team that West Virginia fans need to be looking for and that certainly are circled on the scouting report by Steve Sabins and company.
Yeah, for Wake, honestly, and I say this fully realizing Max Yale is here, right? Wake's Chris Lenovis, their starting pitcher, might be the highest touted player, period, in this regional. He was a second-round draft pick out of high school. And usually, high school picks that you don't think will sign, they're drafted way later, right? To go in the second and still go to college, it's a little rare nowadays. Well, maybe not now because, you can make money in college.
Right.
But that doesn't happen very often.
Mm-hmm.
And so this guy has the pedigree and he is delivered on it. 175 opponent batting average, 110 strikeouts this year. Double-digit
in
wins.
Just 68 innings.
Yeah.
110 in just 68 innings. It's impressive.
And so this guy's he's an ace's ace, right? All-American candidate. And like I said, might be the highest touted guy in terms of the pros.
Mm-hmm.
again, fully understanding Max Yale is here. If those two end up matching up, like that could be some fun. Like I don't know, depending on how these coaches line up their starters, that could be a real heavyweight showdown.
Yeah.
And then for Wake's offense, like they have a couple of real like home run hitters. They have seemingly a great leadoff guy. But the guy that sticks out, Cade Lewis, he seems like their most complete hitter. 365 average, double-digit home runs, double-digit doubles, 55 RBI. Like Gavin Kelly in a way where like hits for average, gets on base, drive runs in, hits the ball out of the ballpark. Just a solid little bit of everything. And Wake comes in like really hot. Like West Virginia's won what, 10 of 12, or 9 of 11 or whatever. Like Wake is coming in having won 8 of their last 10. So like they're a team that's hot at the right time with some superstars on them.
And Wake Forest too, it's interesting going back to their pitching. Obviously, the pitching staff at Wake Forest has been nationally recognized year in and year out for several years now. They've really dove deep into making sure they've got a great pitching staff on a yearly basis. Blake Morningstar, he was supposed to be the big name. He was supposed to be what Chris Lavonis is doing this year, and it hasn't worked out that way for him. But what's interesting is Wake Forest comes into this regional with the top average fastball velocity in the country, over 91 miles per hour average fastball velocity. That's including everyone who's throwing. Some of these guys might not be hitting that. So I think it's 94, actually, I should say it, 94 mile per hour average on their fastball. So Wake Forest certainly, because they're skilled, they can keep offenses down. But when you add in that velocity, it can do it as well. So Cody, tell us about Kentucky.
Yeah, Kentucky actually reminds me, like we've been ragging on them a little bit, and I think they kind of deserve it.
Yeah, for sure.
But they actually kind of remind me of West Virginia from a couple years ago, where they have like a superstar middle infielder in this Tyler Bell. And if you think back a couple years ago, JJ Weatherholt was that dude for West Virginia, but he battled injuries, only played 30 some games. That's this Tyler Bell. Like there was never a point in the year where he was out for like 3 weeks, but like he just wasn't in the lineup every day. He's only played 37 games. And he was supposed to be like, he was a Golden Spikes preseason guy, preseason All-American guy. He was supposed to be like one of the best players in the country. And it just seems like he wasn't 100% healthy all year. But like he still earned first team All SEC, right? Hit 350, like drove in a bunch of runs, scored a bunch of runs. So I don't know if he's 100%. He's playing right now. He played in their conference tournament. So like, that's why I said, like, I wouldn't be surprised if Kentucky can come here and win it, because they have like a JJ Weatherholt type of player who, if he, health wise is just able to be here and play every game and perform, like that's transformational for a college team. And then for their pitcher, I picked, their ace too, Jackson Jelkin. He's thrown among the most innings out of any Power Four pitcher. And we've heard Steve Sabins talk about how there's sometimes you can just look at innings and tell everything you need to know about a pitcher, right? Because what does a lot of innings mean? It means your pitch count is down, which means you're throwing strikes. It means you're not having blow up games where, you're giving up 4 in 2 innings. So your coach is leaving you out there. It means your coach just trusts you flat out, like traffic in the 6th inning is an immediate yank. And that's how I would describe Jelkin. Just like, 8-3, 3.77 ERA, 98, another almost 100 strikeouts, 98 strikeouts. So like the kind of guy that Kentucky just puts on the mound and trusts. And he's like, yeah, he'll get through 6 probably, right? 6 or 7 or, and that's a very, very valuable college baseball player. I mean, every team in the country would take a starter, will give you 5 good innings, let alone 6 or 7.
Right. Yeah, for sure. A couple things here on Kentucky. Outside of the Tyler Bell factor, where if he's healthy the whole year, he's probably in double digits, right? He's only had 7 home runs this season. Outside of him, Ethan Hindle is the only power bat in this Kentucky lineup. So Kentucky and West Virginia, kind of a similar makeup when it comes to offensive identity. They'll play the game sort of the same way. West Virginia is going to push the envelope a little bit more, but even Kentucky's got a guy with 31 stolen base attempts, 29 successful. So certainly they can push the envelope there as well. Kentucky, by the way, Tyler Bell, speaking of him, 0 of 7 last year against West Virginia in the Clemson Regional. So he is still looking for his first hit against the Mountaineers in the same way that D. Kennedy is still looking for his first hit against the Mountaineers this year. That was me. I should have done that to D. Kennedy. He had a really nice season. He's a great player. He just had a really bad weekend here in Morgantown.
And in the Big 12 tournament.
And in the Big 12 tournament. That's true. That's true. Now that's Cody piling on. All right, tell us about Binghamton, the double winners out of the American East conference that struggles with identity.
Yeah. The only conference champion in this regional, and I think that counts for something, right? They've won their conference tournament 2 years in a row, and like that means something, especially you think at that level where year after year you're going to lose all your best players. That speaks to a really good program. And Steve mentioned like on Monday, he said the only thing I know about Binghamton is they got a big donation a couple years ago and built state-of-the-art facilities.
Huge.
And it's like, yeah, a team at that level that has state-of-the-art stuff success follows that. So I said Kentucky reminds me of West Virginia a couple years ago. Binghamton reminds me of Kansas this year, where you look at their team stats and they're okay at everything, right? Like they hit for decent average, they hit some home runs, they steal some bases, they throw strikes, they strike some people out, they don't give up a ton. But nothing jumps out. But then you look at the record and you're like, oh, they never lose in conference. They kind of breeze through their conference tournament. And it's the same with Kansas, where it was like, what does Kansas do really well? Nothing really. They do everything all right, but it just comes together, right? And that's Binghamton, where I think it's like they don't have like a superstar, right? But they have when you put their 9 guys in the lineup, it just becomes a really good team. I describe Kansas as a sum of its parts team, and that's how I look at Binghamton, where it's like they're better than any one player or any one stat is going to tell you they are. Now that being said, since I do have to pick some players, Matt Bolton, their center fielder, he's a sophomore. His second year in college, his second all-conference selection. He's a guy, and I hate to do this because I hate it when other people do this, but he's a guy that you could probably imagine jumping up a level in the transfer portal and standing out somewhere and turning into a high draft pick. And like I said, I hate doing that because I think it's good for guys to be where they are. But, he's that kind of player, hits for average, hits for power, steals bases, just does everything you want. And then their pitcher, Connor Griffin, like it's different in a lower conference, right? Where you're not going to get the same pitching talent as the Big 12, but there's something to be said about guys that can just get it done. Kind of like Jelkin, where it's like, just go out and do the job. And this guy, like 212 opponent batting average in the America East, like really high in doubles allowed, really high, or least doubles allowed, and then, really high in least homers allowed. So like, I don't know, like he's given up some runs, but he keeps the ball in the ballpark. He keeps the ball out of the gaps. He doesn't really walk guys. He doesn't give up a ton of hits. And like I said, that's like just a solid college baseball player. And I think, there's always sometimes in regionals where there's a team or two that win a game nobody thinks they should. And it's pitchers like that are just solid and they just have a really good night that lead to upsets like that.
Yeah, it's teams like Binghamton, these 4-seed teams, these conference champions, that they make the regional host team sweat a little bit because you have to decide what to do with your pitching staff. You never want to be in a position where, just to take West Virginia as the example here, Steve doesn't want to leave Max in the dugout for Friday and pitch potentially anyone else. We'll just say Ian Corn, Chanson Cole, because you don't want to even entertain the possibility of losing that opener and having everyone kind of second guess, okay, well, what would have happened if your ace is out there? But you also don't want to burn your ace against a team that you probably should beat 9 out of 10 times or more before getting to possibly the second or third best team in the regional. It's a really sticky situation that coaches have to deal with for these opening games of regionals. Wake Forest is going to be in a similar situation to a degree. Do you throw your guy against Kentucky or do you throw your number 2 thinking that you're probably going to play West Virginia in the late game on Saturday and set up that star pitching matchup you were talking about earlier, Cody? It's a really interesting situation, and hopefully we're going to get more answers on what these teams are going to do pitching wise on Thursday when we hear from these head coaches there over there at the ballpark. But Binghamton, the head coach Tim Sinicki, he's been there for forever. He's led the Binghamton team, the Bearcats, to all 7 now of their all-time NCAA tournament appearances, starting, I believe, back in 2009 was their first time they broke through. Haven't won a game in the tournament since then, so they're looking to do that this year, whether it's against West Virginia or one of the other teams in this regional. But it seems like with Binghamton, they do draw a decent amount of walks, and one of the players on this team, I believe it's Sean Sweeney, ranks among, I think it's the top 10 and toughest to strike out in the country. Now that said, they do strike out a ton against admittedly weaker competition. This Binghamton team did not play a single NCAA tournament team throughout the year. No wins, no games against teams in the field of 64. 374 strikeouts at the plate, 375, excuse me. Just as a comparison here, West Virginia, who's playing Power 4 teams on a on a weekendly basis, I guess I can say to make up a word, 417 strikeouts. So very comparable plate discipline, I guess you could say, and West Virginia draws a decent amount of walks as well. So something to watch out on Friday is how patient Binghamton can afford to be against probably the best pitcher they've seen all year, whether that's Maxiell or Ian Korn or Chance and Cole, whoever that becomes. How patient can the Bearcats lineup be?
Yeah, and I think if we want to spend a second talking about West Virginia, I think maybe the concern, like, we know the strengths, right? The strengths is starting pitching. If they win this regional, likely it'll be because they have the best starting pitching, which they might even if they don't win. I think maybe the concern is that the offense ran a little cold out in Arizona. Like they won those first two games and it wasn't really an offensive engine. And then obviously in the championship against Kansas, you fall a little flat. Like they hit better than 0 runs, but it was still 0 runs.
And really, those 3 games, they were just kind of mirrors of one another, mirror opposites, I guess I should say. So the first 2 games, Kansas State, Arizona State, West Virginia did a pretty good job of scoring in key situations when you've got guys on second and third and things of that nature, scoring with 2 outs. They just couldn't do that against Kansas. So you hope it's the other version that shows up here in this regional.
Right. And I was going to say, like, we just saw them go through that home run stretch where they were just mashing out of the ballpark. And I think the concern this weekend is if they fall back into what they were in the middle of the season, where they were a little bit cold on offense, right? Still winning series, still getting it done, but really had to work for offense. That's probably the only concern. But like I said, their strength obviously is the pitching, where if the pitching's good enough, like we saw in those first 2 Big 12 games, like it doesn't matter, right? Like as long as you scratch 4 runs across, if you get Maxiell and Chance and Cole performances, like you might, or more than likely, still going to win.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how West Virginia, just as a program, handles the regional in 2019. You know, people around the country always say the first time you host a regional, it's just so unique. It's just something you've never had to deal with before as a program, and that regional just didn't go West Virginia's way, right? We all know how that ended. In 2026, they've done it before. They've played in big series this year. They've won a lot of those big series this year. This team just feels better equipped to handle this type of atmosphere, this type of environment than that 2019 team did, as talented as that group was. And in that same breath, I want to say it's going to be interesting to see how Kansas handles hosting a regional for the first time in a very, very long time. They've expanded the seating area out there in left field and doing some creative things. It's fun to see teams be able to do that and have those capabilities to do that. So it's going to be interesting to see how, looking at the Big 12, how Kansas does hosting a regional. All right, Cody, we got to get everybody out of here on this. Your prediction for the Morgantown Regional before it gets underway: West Virginia, Wake Forest, Kentucky, Binghamton, shocking the nation. Who do we have walking out of this regional and likely heading out to Los Angeles next week to take on UCLA and the #1 team in the country?
I like West Virginia and Wake to play on Monday.
We're going to Monday. Okay.
I just think it's going to be too close, and I guess I got to take West Virginia.
I like West Virginia as well in this region.
I was going to say, who do you have?
I like West Virginia as well. Kentucky, I think they've just got too many glaring weak spots or deficiencies that it's going to be too much to overcome against solid pitching staffs in Wake Forest and West Virginia. Wake Forest, certainly they can mash the ball. That they're among the nation's leaders in home runs, and even doing so despite not having its best power lineup that it's had in recent years. I just think West Virginia, this is the year that they're going to break through from a regional at home perspective. They've obviously won each of the last 2 regionals, and it might not be a sweep like it has been the past 2 years. I think West Virginia wins its home regional for the first time ever. They've hosted in 1955 in a district tournament against Wake Forest, by the way. We've got that information on the website, goldenbluenation.com. Cody's written some articles this week as well, and will continue to do so on this regional and what it means historically and in the present for West Virginia. But the second time West Virginia and Wake Forest will play in a regional here in Morgantown. A little bit different, though, in 1955. All right, that's going to do it for us here on the Gold and Blue Nation podcast. Again, make sure to stick with us all weekend long for coverage on the website, on the TV side of things, and on social media as well. For Cody Nespor, I'm Ryan Decker. This has been the Gold and Blue Nation podcast, presented by Mountain State Oral and Facial Surgery, your premier dental implant destination.